Did you know that the same church that anointed the Knights Templar as sacred defenders of the faith was the same one that betrayed them and condemned them to death? Yes, the Vatican, the ultimate symbol of the Christian faith, holds behind its walls one of the darkest secrets in the history of humanity. But why? What drove the church to destroy its own holy warriors? And what is really hidden in the Vatican's secret archives about this betrayal? Maybe you've never stopped to think about it. But there are hidden documents, forbidden books and records buried under centuries of silence that reveal a story completely different from the one we learn in books, a story of ambition, power, conspiracy and mystery, involving the Vatican, the Templars, and a secret that could have changed the course of the Christian faith forever. While many see the Vatican simply as the spiritual center of Catholicism, few know that it houses one of the most inaccessible libraries in the world, with more than 85 kilometers of underground shelves filled with manuscripts, treaties, and records that the Church has never allowed to the public. And among these documents, they say, lies the true reason behind the extermination of the Knights Templar, one of the most powerful, enigmatic, and feared orders of the Middle Ages. Have you ever heard of Order of the Temple of Solomon, better known as Knights Templar? They were warrior monks, authorized by the Church itself, who grew in influence, wealth, and power to the point of becoming a threat to the very structure of the Vatican. But what was the real reason behind this brutal turn by the Church against its allies? What did the Templars know that made them too dangerous to stay alive? In this video, we will delve into hidden documents, lost manuscripts, and ancient secrets that reveal the true conspiracy behind the fall of the Templars, and the silent but decisive role of the Vatican in all of this. Prepare to question everything you believe about the Church's faith, history, and dark underbelly. Because the question that really doesn't want to go away is, what is the Vatican hiding behind the end of the Templar Order? What if I told you that this secret still reverberates in the silent halls of the Vatican, and that many believe the echoes of this betrayal still affect the spiritual world today? What was done against the Templars was not just a political decision, it was a spiritual rupture, a deep cut in the trust between faith and truth. And if there's anything we learn from delving into Vatican secrets, is that the truth always finds a way to emerge, even if it takes centuries. Therefore, if you feel the weight of these revelations in your heart, and believe that we are living in times when the truth needs to be illuminated, I want to invite you now to leave a prayer request here in the comments. Yes, a sincere prayer, whether for truth, for divine justice, or even for your spiritual life. Let's create together a chain of faith, of light, in the midst of so many secrets and darkness. And if you prefer, you can just write prayer, and we will already be praying with you. Here, each video is more than information. It's a calling, a call to think, question, strengthen ourselves, and unite in something much bigger than ourselves. Then, leave your like, because this shows YouTube that this content deserves to reach more people, and it might be exactly what someone needs to hear. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because what we are going to reveal is just beginning. Vatican mysteries, the forbidden books, the conspiracies of faith, all of this will be unraveled, step by step. And now that you know that the same church that anointed the Templars was the one that destroyed them, imagine what else it could be hiding. Because in the next section, we will reveal how the rise of the Knights Templar began to upset the most powerful men on earth, and why the Vatican preferred to see them burn in the public square, rather than continue to allow their secrets to be kept by them. The story of the Knights Templar begins almost silently, but surrounded by a sacred purpose, protecting the Christian pilgrims who traveled to Jerusalem after the First Crusade. In the year 1119, in the heart of the Holy Land, the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, later known as Knights Templar. At first, there were only 9 men. 9. No armies, no riches, just vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and an unshakable oath to protect the Christian faith with one's life. But quickly, these men began to gain notoriety, and it was the support of the Church that made them grow. The Vatican, seeing in them a strategic force amid the chaos of the Crusades, grants order unique privileges, tax exemption, the right to build your own castles and churches, total autonomy over your actions, and, the most controversial of all, the permission to answer only to the Pope. No king, no feudal lord, just the pontiff. This direct connection to the Vatican is what gave the Templars unprecedented power, and that's exactly where the game starts to change. Over time, the Templars stopped being just spiritual warriors. They became administrators, diplomats, and, most importantly, the bankers of medieval Europe. They created an advanced financial system for the time, allowing nobles, kings, and pilgrims to deposit money in one part of the continent and withdraw it in another. A revolutionary idea. It was the embryo of what we today call the modern banking system. The order began to accumulate treasures, lands, castles, sacred relics, and secrets. Many secrets. They are said to have possessed documents that could shake the foundations of the Christian faith, including records about the lineage of Jesus Christ, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Holy Grail, and even manuscripts that would have been removed from the Bible by decision of the Church. Theories? Perhaps. But something made the Vatican silence this order with a violence that haunts the history of humanity to this day. The Templars began to be viewed with suspicious eyes, not only by their Muslim enemies, but also by those who were supposed to protect them, kings and popes. His financial power became a problem. Many nobles were indebted to the order, and one of the most indebted was precisely Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, an ambitious, arrogant monarch with a thirst for absolute control. He saw the Templars no longer as defenders of the faith, but as a real threat to his authority. And what did he do? He sought the support of those who could authorize the destruction of this order, the Vatican. Here, once again, comes the obscure role of the Church. Pope Clement V, under political pressure and afraid of losing influence over the kings of Europe, ceded. And this decision changes everything. In a calculated coup on Friday, October 13, 1307, the Templars were surprised. Many are arrested, accused of heresy, blasphemy, devil worship, and occult practices. But none of these accusations have actually been proven. They were forged, tortured, forced, all with the papal seal of approval. Can you see the depth of this betrayal? The same church that authorized their existence now condemned them based on lies. This is where the mystery deepens. Because if the order represented only a political danger, why was it necessary to create a religious campaign to destroy them? Why not just dissolve the order? Why turn them into enemies of the faith? Some scholars say that the Templars had discovered something inside Solomon's temple, something that the church could never allow to become public. Others say that they had documents that proved that certain dogmas were distorted, and that true Christian spirituality was different from that taught by the clergy of the time. This theory is not new. In fact, manuscripts found in later centuries, and which supposedly came from dissident branches of the Templar order, speak of a forbidden truth buried in the basements of the Vatican. Are these manuscripts still stored in the Vatican secret library, far from the eyes of the world, along with so many other hidden texts, apocryphal books, lost gospels, and theological treatises that never reached the people? Does the Vatican really fear that the true story of the Templars will be known? This is why the mystery of the Knights Templar and the Vatican's betrayal remains one of the most discussed and studied subjects to this day. Because this is not just a chapter in medieval history, it is about something that echoes to this day, and which directly touches on deep issues of faith, truth, and the manipulation of the sacred. Don't you find it curious that, even over the centuries, the Vatican has never made a public request for official forgiveness for the persecution of the order? This silence speaks. Speak loudly. He speaks like someone afraid to touch the wound, or to awaken secrets that still sleep in the underground of power. And when you connect all of this to the other mysteries already revealed about the Vatican, like the censored books, the hidden prophecies, the removed texts from the Bible, you begin to realize that there is a much higher standard being hidden behind every decision, every omission, every burning of historical and spiritual archives. If you've been with me this far, it's because you feel like something doesn't fit, that there are pieces missing from this ancient puzzle. And that's exactly why this channel exists, to investigate, question, and give voice to the secrets buried by history. And if you also believe that the truth needs to be revealed, leave your comment below. Write, "The truth needs to come out," or just "Templar secret," if you want more people to know this story. But what few know, and what the Vatican would never dare confirm, is that the Knights Templar, during the Crusades, did not just fight. They also collected information, symbols, manuscripts, sacred artifacts, and secret knowledge from the East. And this may have been the real reason for the fear that they began to arouse within the Church itself. While many thought the Templars were just on a mission to fight for the Christian faith, they were fighting another kind of battle, the battle for lost knowledge. The order had access to ancient writings, including those from civilizations that preceded Christianity. Writings that spoke about the origin of the soul, divine energy, the hidden power of prayer, sacred rituals that were erased from history, and even about the true words spoken by Jesus that never reached us because of the censorship and manipulation of biblical texts over the centuries. Unofficial sources claim that in Jerusalem, excavating in the ruins of the ancient Solomon's Temple, the Templars found documents and objects considered so spiritually powerful that they could redefine the role of the Church as mediator between God and man. A knowledge so profound, so transformative, that it could not be shared with the people, at least not under the eyes of the ecclesiastical leadership that wanted to maintain absolute control over faith and salvation. It was there that the Templars went from protectors of the faith to holders of esoteric and occult knowledge, derived directly from Eastern sources, Gnostic sects, and ancestral manuscripts that contained teachings that the Church considered heretical. But were they really heretics, or just too revealing? This is one of the most delicate points in the history of the Knights Templar. They not only knew these secrets, they studied, practiced, and protected them. Some reports claim that certain Templar rituals contained prayers and invocations that were not part of the traditional Christian liturgy. Mystical elements, codes, sacred geometries, references to universal energies and to oneself in a divine presence, which placed the individual face to face with the Creator, without the need for a mediator, without the need for clergy. This, for the Church of the time, was unacceptable. If people discovered that they could connect directly with the divine, without needing priests, confessions, or sacraments, the power of the Church would collapse in a short time. And this is exactly why the Templars came to be seen as a silent threat, a spiritual bomb about to explode. It was no longer about heresy. It was about control. And all of this became even more serious when the order began to document this knowledge. Yes, the Templars wrote, translating Arabic, Persian, and Hebrew texts. And these documents have not disappeared. Many experts believe that some of these writings were hidden, transported to strategic locations in Europe, and to this day they remain in underground tunnels, crypts, or in the secret archives of the Vatican. The call Vatican Secret Library, the one that houses documents inaccessible to the public, priceless manuscripts, forbidden texts, apocryphal books, and correspondence between popes and monarchs, could be the key to understanding what was really behind the persecution of the Templar Order. The problem? It's just that not even the most respected researchers in the world can access it. Only a few cardinals, under an oath of silence, are allowed to consult part of these archives. And the most curious thing is that the Vatican has never denied the existence of this library. On the contrary, he recognizes her, but it avoids answering what exactly is inside. Why so much secrecy? Why so afraid of the truth? What is so dangerous about these documents? Some hypotheses talk about a collection of Gospels that contradict the traditional version of the New Testament. Others mention the book of Baruch, the writings of Thomas, the so-called Nag Hammadi Gospels, discovered in Egypt, and which bring a completely different vision of Jesus' mission. And there are still those who believe that there are records of a secret blood lineage linked to the Messiah, deliberately hidden by the Church over the centuries. The Templars somehow discovered part of this truth. They knew, and they protected this knowledge with their lives. But this came at a price, too high a price. They were persecuted, hunted, tortured, and exterminated. But the knowledge did not disappear. He was just buried. And now, little by little, he resurfaces. Many alternative historians, archaeologists, and independent scholars have dedicated themselves to deciphering clues, symbols hidden in works of art, Gothic cathedrals, ancient maps, and even in the architecture of the Vatican itself. Because the Templars, apparently, encoded your messages, leaving traces for those who really want to see beyond the veil of official history. And that's what makes us keep investigating. Because when you connect the dots between the rise of the Templars, the fear of the Vatican, the brutal persecution, and the sepulchral silence of the Church to this day, it becomes clear that this is not a mistake of the past. It is something that still bothers, still hurts, still scares. And that's exactly why you're here. Because you feel like there is something more, something that was never fully said, something that is being revealed little by little, and that could change everything we know about faith, spirituality, and the Vatican's role in building a world where few have access to, the true sacred. By this time, the Knights Templar were not just a sacred military order. They had become an economic, political, and spiritual power, a network of influence that crossed borders, and which, for many European kings, was a silent threat. But for Philip IV of France, the problem was not just Templar power, it was the money. Philip was up to his neck in debt. Their coffers were empty. He had spent fortunes on wars, political campaigns, and maintaining his throne. And who were your main creditors? Yes, the Templars. The order controlled lands, fortresses, and an absurd amount of wealth spread across Europe. They were the real bankers of Christianity, with a credit and deposit system so advanced that even kings resorted to them. And this, for a proud monarch like Philip, was unacceptable. He needed money, but most of all, he needed to get rid of the burden of debt and eliminate any force that could threaten his absolute authority. It was then that the conspiracy began to be hatched. Felipe needed an excuse, and the Vatican gave it to him. Pope Clement V at the time of the conspiracy was French, and, interestingly, had been placed on the papal throne with strong influence from Philip himself. This already shows the level of political interference that corrodes the spiritual decisions of the Church. Clement was, in a way, a pope under domination. And it was in this scenario that the darkest plan in Templar history began to unfold. The king wanted the order's assets. I wanted your secrets. I wanted him to disappear. But he couldn't just attack them without justification. Then a series of absurd accusations, forged, manipulated, and supported by supposed testimonies, obtained under torture. Heresy, sodomy, idol worship, satanic rituals, blasphemy. All of this was placed on the shoulders of the Templars without any real basis. But that was enough, because the goal was not justice. It was silence. It was the loot. It was power. In the dead of night of a Friday, October 13th, 1307, Philip orders a coordinated action to arrest all members of the order who were in France. It was a brutal, strategic, unexpected attack. Many were caught in their sleep. Others were surrounded at their posts. None had a chance to defend themselves. And that's why, to this day, Friday the 13th bears the mark of bad luck and mystery. It is a spiritual scar of a betrayal that echoes through the centuries. And the Vatican? Silenced, supported, endorsed. Even knowing the loyalty of the Templars, even recognizing their achievements in the Crusades, even having authorized their existence and mission. Clement V, pressured by Philip and fearing of losing authority before European monarchs, gives in to political blackmail and condemns the Templars in the name of faith. The papal bull dissolving the order is signed, and with it, the fate of thousands of Templar brothers is sealed. Torture became common practice. Dark prisons, long interrogations, physical and psychological suffering. Many died before they could even be tried. Others were forced to confess to crimes they never committed, just to stop the pain. But the leaders resisted. One of them, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Order of the Temple, maintained his faith and his honor until the end. And when he was finally burned at the stake in 1314 in front of Notre Dame Cathedral, he allegedly cast a curse against his traitors, Pope Clement and King Philip. In less than a year, I summon you to the judgment seat of God. The most amazing thing is that the prophecy was fulfilled. Both died in less than 12 months. Coincidence? Divine justice? Spiritual punishment? The fact is that this sequence of events marked not only the end of the Templar Order as a military organization, but the beginning of an aura of mystery and hidden power which remains associated with the name of the Templars to this day. They may have been physically exterminated, but the symbol of their existence, their mission, and the secrets they protected was never erased. And this direct connection between the Vatican and treason is not something forgotten. It is recorded in documents, in letters, in hidden files that the Vatican secret library is still kept under lock and key, because if the Church did indeed participate, and everything indicates that it did, in the destruction of a sacred order, this raises a fundamental question. How many other secrets are hidden inside, waiting to be revealed? What else did the Vatican provide to kings and emperors in exchange for alliances and power? What other orders have been persecuted, destroyed, or manipulated by hidden interests masquerading as spiritual doctrine? And how far does these conspiracies reach? The Knights Templar were only the first major victim, but it seems that they were not the only ones. And if you follow this channel, you know that there are patterns, silencing rituals, changes to official history, and an invisible but present line that connects the censorship of sacred texts, the persecution of mystics, and the concealment of true Christian spirituality. The burning question is, what exactly did the Templars protect with such fervor that justified such an effort to erase them from history? What documents, what relics, what sacred knowledge were in his custody? And the most disturbing thing is some of this still hidden inside the Vatican. If you're here, reading and watching so far, you feel it. It's not just curiosity. It's that feeling that there is something much bigger, much deeper, that has never been said publicly, something that defies everything we know as official faith, something that cries out to be discovered. And so, now I invite you to leave your mark in the comments. Write, Philip betrayed the faith. Or if you want to position yourself more directly, type, the truth of the Templars needs to be revealed. It shows that you are part of this journey. And more than that, it helps this video reach other people who, like you, want answers. When Pope Clement V, surrounded by the influence of King Philip IV, finally signs the bull that formalizes the dissolution of the Templar Order, what is witnessed is not just a bureaucratic act, but the institutional end of one of the most enigmatic and powerful orders in the history of Christianity. With that papal seal, the fate of the Templars was sealed. And more than that, with that gesture, the Church itself turned its back on its own children. The same Church that blessed them, burned them alive. This phrase in itself carries a symbolic weight that echoes to this day. How could an entity that was supposed to represent divine light delve so deeply into the darkness of politics, ambition, and fear? Because yes, it was fear that guided each of these decisions. The fear of losing power, the fear that secrets would escape, the fear that the truth the Templars protected would be revealed. With the papal bull, the inquisitorial apparatus was activated with force. Men who had fought in the name of faith, who had been recognized by the Vatican itself as defenders of Christianity, began to be labeled as heretics. Their properties were confiscated, their castles taken, their coffers emptied. Many tried to escape, some managed, but most were arrested, tortured, and executed. And we're not talking about quick or discreet executions. We are talking about public bonfires, in crowded squares, in front of the population that previously venerated them. In Paris, Rome, London, and other great cities of medieval Europe, the smoke from bonfires mixed with the chants of masses. The smell of burning flesh spread through the alleys as church bells continued to ring. And all this with the papal blessing. There was no mercy. There was no hesitation. Only the cold decision to erase the order from existence, and along with it, the secrets they swore to protect until death. And these secrets remain the centerpiece of this entire conspiracy. Because it was never just about money, although the order's riches were vast. The question was what the Templars knew, what they had found in the excavations of Solomon's Temple, the secret manuscripts that were accessed during the Crusades, the ancient rituals they had preserved, and the sacred symbols that contradicted the official narrative of the Church. Historical records indicate that part of this knowledge was transferred to other secret societies. After the fall of the order, fragments of texts, hidden symbols, codes, and doctrines began to appear discreetly in other organizations that emerged in the following centuries, as if the Templar legacy had continued, albeit in disguise. And once again, the Vatican remained silent. He never acknowledged the error. He never publicly recanted. He never handed over the secret files that could shed light on the real motivation behind the persecution. It is as if, by keeping these secrets guarded, the Church still maintains control over the past and, in a way, over the future of the Christian faith. Because the question that no one can fully answer is, what in fact was discovered by the Templars that caused them to be destroyed so urgently? Some theories, considered by many to be speculative, gain strength over time. They talk about documents that directly contradict the official version of Jesus' life, which call into question the structure of the Church as a mediator between God and men. Others suggest that the Templars had evidence that certain church councils had manipulated portions of the Bible, suppressing gospels that spoke about direct spirituality without the need for institutions. And there are still those who believe that the Templars discovered holy relics, such as the Holy Grail, fragments of the Ark of the Covenant, or ancient scrolls that detailed the true nature of the divine. And where is this evidence today? Many believe that what was left was destroyed. Others are convinced that some of it was hidden, buried, sealed, or under lock and key in the Vatican's secret archives, along with other banned books, letters erased from history, and documents that never came to light. The Church's silence on the Templar issue is not an accidental forgetfulness. It's a strategy, because the more time passes, the more history turns into legend, and the more legend it becomes, the easier it is for religious authorities to maintain control of the official narrative. However, in recent years, this barrier has begun to crumble, thanks to independent researchers, fearless archaeologists, system-defying authors, and people like you who are here, now, searching for something that not found in school books or in Sunday homilies. The scariest thing is realizing that the formula used against the Templars may have been repeated at other times in history. Whenever a group or individual got too close to spiritual truths that could free the people from institutional dependence, accusations, persecution, and censure arose. And who was always behind it? Directly or indirectly, the Vatican, an institution that claims to guard the light, but that, over the centuries, he knew very well how to operate in the shadows. And what we are left with today are the pieces of this puzzle, fragments that, when put together, begin to show a pattern of silencing, manipulation, and control over faith, a pattern of fear disguised as zeal, a pattern that needs to be exposed. And that's exactly why you're here. From the moment Pope Clement V signed the dissolution of the order, what followed was a true horror show, a deep dive into institutional darkness. The same church that once raised its chalices blessing the Templars in the Crusades, now raised its voice to accuse them, its fist to judge them, and the fire to consume them. Mass arrests happened not only in France but in different parts of Europe, as if by magic, or rather manipulation. Those who were seen as heroes began to be treated as enemies of the faith. The persecution was not silent, nor was it subtle. She was brutal. Dragged from their strongholds, many Templars were handcuffed before shocked crowds. Others were humiliated, stripped of their sacred insignia, and treated like common criminals. But what came next was even more cruel. The confession process required by the Inquisition was a ritual of physical and psychological suffering. Medieval tortures were applied, with surgical precision, stretching of limbs, crushing of fingers, simulated drowning, iron hooks, hot coals on the skin, all in the name of faith, according to his tormentors. But what faith is this that feeds on pain? What faith is this that only survives at the cost of the forced silence of its devotees? Meanwhile, the order's leaders were held in solitary captivity, many of them without real trial, no right to defense, condemned even before any verdict, because their destinies were already determined behind the scenes at the Vatican and the French throne. And among these men, there was one who carried not only the weight of the order on his shoulders, but also the secret of everything the Templars had kept for centuries: Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Order of the Temple. Molay was a man of deep faith, respected by his brothers and feared by his enemies. He knew too much. He knew what had been discovered in Jerusalem. He knew which manuscripts were hidden. He knew who within the church had participated in the conspiracy. And maybe that's why it was kept silent for so long. They wanted to break it. They wanted to extract a confession from him that would justify the narrative fabricated by the king and the pope. But Mole resisted. For 7 years he remained a prisoner, being transferred from one place to another, interrogated, pressured, threatened. And even when, under extreme torture, a confession was extracted, he later publicly retracted, stating that he had lied because of the pain and that the Templars were innocent. This act of courage sealed his fate. In 1314, Jacques de Molay was led to an island in the river Seine in Paris. The site had been prepared for a public execution. The pyre was already erected. The population gathered. The sky, they say, was covered with heavy clouds. An oppressive silence dominated the environment. He was tied to a stake, dressed in the white Templar robe that they had tried to take from him. And there, in front of the people, the leadership of the church and representatives of the king, he made his last declaration, a phrase that to this day reverberates as an echo of eternal justice. Pope Clement, King Philip, in less than a year, I summon you to the judgment seat of God. This curse was not a cry of hatred, but a prophecy, a sentence handed down by someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to reveal. And, to everyone's astonishment, the curse was fulfilled. Clement V died 33 days later, and Philip IV a few months later, victim of a sudden illness. Two powerful men, brought down by a sentence from a man sentenced to death. Coincidence? For many, no. For many, it was the ultimate proof that there was something divine or terribly spiritual behind the story of the Templars. And while Mole burned at the stake, the secrets of the order seemed to burn with him. But did they really burn? Or were these secrets protected, hidden, transferred into faithful hands? There are documents that suggest that part of the Templar structure survived in hiding, giving rise to other secret groups that kept the Order's original mission alive: protect true spiritual knowledge, hidden from the eyes of the world, kept away from the Vatican, and proof against the fires of history. What the Vatican failed to predict is that killing a man does not kill an idea, that burning books does not erase truths, that destroying symbols does not cancel memories. And the traces of this conspiracy were engraved in stones, codes, inscriptions, and reports that spanned centuries. There are those who say that the Vatican itself keeps never-revealed documents about the last days of the Order in its secret library. There are those who claim that the Holy Grail, or what it represents, is still hidden, under surveillance, in a sacred place that only true initiates know about. The presence of Templar crosses carved in strategic places in Europe, of symbols identical to those used in occult orders, of references in hermetic texts and apocryphal manuscripts, all point in the same direction. The Templars knew more than they could ever tell, and that is precisely why they were exterminated. Not because of what they did, but because of what they knew. And more than that, because of what they refused to deliver. If you've made it this far, it's because you feel deep in your soul that there's something wrong with the official story, that there are holes, silences, lies, told with sacred clothes. And if you also believe that Jacques de Molay's sacrifice was not in vain, leave your comment now. Write, "Molay did not die in vain," or "Secrets burn, but they don't disappear." This helps this video reach more people and keep this truth alive, because we still have much more to reveal. And in the next section, we will begin to follow the trails of those who tried to rescue this hidden knowledge, facing the same system that one day set fire to the living faith of the Templars. From the moment Jacques de Molay was consumed by the flames, something was suspended in the air. Not just the smell of injustice, but a doubt that never went away. What did the Templars really know? What was so powerful, so forbidden, so threatening, that it demanded the eternal silence of an entire order? Public executions erased bodies, but they did not erase questions. And these questions continued to echo, crossing centuries, hidden in forgotten archives, in closed crypts, in underground libraries that not even time dared to touch. For years, scholars, historians, archaeologists, and curious people have tried to find clues. And some of these clues, strangely enough, seem to point to a very specific place: the secret Vatican archives. One of the most restricted sections in the world, inaccessible to the public, where documents considered sensitive, controversial, or inadequate for popular knowledge are kept under strict surveillance. Many believe that there, among time-eaten codices and papyri sealed with ecclesiastical seals, rest the original documents of the Templar order, including meeting records, old maps, lists of names, and most importantly, reports on discoveries made in the Middle East during the Crusades. But why would the Vatican keep these documents secret? Why was it never allowed to be completely released? This is the question that generates curiosity, indignation, and the irresistible taste of religious conspiracy. If the Templars were heretics, as claimed, then why preserve their writings? And if they weren't, why the silence? The possible answers are disturbing. There are theories that suggest that the Templars not only accumulated gold, but that they were the guardians of sacred relics of immeasurable spiritual and historical value. Relics that, if revealed, could disrupt the Church's official narrative about the origins of Christianity, the life of Jesus, and the first centuries of the faith. Among the items most mentioned in these rumors is the legendary Templar treasury, which would not just be gold or jewels, but biblical artifacts, apocryphal texts, sacred objects, and even the Holy Grail. Many believe that part of this treasure was hidden before the fall of the order. Documents found in abandoned monasteries mention mysterious convoys leaving Templar fortresses days before the mass arrests. In some reports, they speak of secret tunnels, of sealed chests buried in remote places, of maps written in codes that only the brothers of the order knew how to decipher. And in all these accounts there is a common element: the idea that the Vatican knew about the existence of the treasure and looked for it, or even located it, but never revealed it to the public. Now imagine for a moment that this is true. Imagine that the Vatican actually has in its basements not just physical relics, but documentary evidence of a history completely different from that taught in the pulpits. Imagine that they are stored there suppressed gospels, letters between apostles never published, detailed descriptions of Templar rituals that refer to what we today call occult spirituality, and even records about supposed bloodlines directly linked to biblical figures. The shock this would cause to popular faith would be devastating. Millions of people would start to question not only the history of the Church, but their own faith, their deepest beliefs, and the entire structure that supports institutionalized religiosity. And that is why, theorists say, the Vatican will never open these archives to the world, because what's inside could not only rewrite history, but completely deconstruct it. But even in the face of this silence, the evidence continues to emerge, discreet, hidden, but visible to those who know where to look. Fragments of Templar manuscripts appeared in antique shops in Spain. A set of unusual maps has been found in a French abbey, indicating routes to possible hiding places. And there is also the case of the mysterious Chinon scroll, rediscovered in 2001, which shows that the Pope himself had acquitted the Templars shortly before their execution, which completely contradicts the official version published for centuries. This document was hidden for more than 700 years in the Vatican archives, without anyone having access. Why? What else was hidden next to it? What other truths were erased, or worse, locked away so no one would ever find it? And it doesn't stop there. There are rumors, still unproven, that the Vatican has records of not only Christian, but also Jewish and Egyptian artifacts, connecting the Templars to knowledge much older than we imagine. This opens the way to even more complex theories, such as that the Templars had access to ancestral wisdom that went back to the mystery schools of Egypt, the Jewish Kabbalah, Gnostic teachings and spiritual practices that were classified as heresy precisely because they revealed the divine presence within the human being, without the need for ecclesiastical authority. If this is true, then what the Templars protected was not just treasure, it was a spiritual key, a secret about the divine that has been deliberately hidden. And perhaps this is the real reason why they were persecuted, tortured, and eliminated, not because of material wealth, but because they were the guardians of knowledge that put the Church's control over people's souls at risk. And that's precisely what makes everything even more fascinating. Because the more the Vatican remains silent, the more the clamor for answers grows. But it increases the certainty that there is something much bigger behind the official story. And the more this community becomes stronger, this brotherhood of seekers, of curious people, of non-conformists, of people like you who feel that there is something wrong, incomplete, omitted, and that can no longer be ignored. After centuries of silence, hidden documents, stories erased with iron and fire, many ask themselves, has the Vatican ever recognized the injustice committed against the Knights Templar? Has there ever been an official request for forgiveness from the Church? The answer, for many scholars, still sounds like painful irony. In technical terms, yes, there was limited recognition, but it's an acknowledgement that feels more like an embarrassed whisper than a public confession. In 2007, the academic world was surprised by the release of a document that had remained hidden for more than 700 years inside the Vatican's secret library, the so-called Chinon Scroll. This parchment, dated 1308, records the papal absolution granted to Templar leaders, including Jacques de Molay, by Pope Clement V. Yes, the same pope who, under pressure from King Philip V, signed the dissolution of the order and allowed its persecution. However, in that secret document, the pontiff stated that, after analyzing the testimonies and inquisitorial records, there was not enough evidence to convict the Templars of heresy. In other words, the Church knew even then that the accusations were weak, manipulated, and probably false. But even so, nothing was done to stop them. The condemnation machine was already in motion. The political power of the King of France was too great, and the fear of a break between the monarchy and the Church spoke louder than the truth. Therefore, despite the recorded acquittal, the Templars were burned. This parchment was hidden in the Vatican archives for, more than 7 centuries. 7 centuries. And it was only discovered in 2001 by an Italian researcher called Barbara Frail. Its existence exposes not only the historical error committed, but also the calculated silence of the Church, which preferred to hide this document rather than use it to clear the memory of thousands of unjustly condemned men. This is not just an omission. For many scholars, this is complicity. The Vatican could have restored the order's honor at any time in recent centuries. It could have gone public, revealed the files, recognized the error, but he chose silence. A convenient, cold, institutional silence. When the parchment was finally published, the Church did not make any major announcements. There was no solemn mass, no official request for forgiveness, nor a public gesture that represented the dimension of the historical error. What happened was a discreet publication, limited to academic circles, almost as if the objective was not to repair, but simply to comply with the schedule in the face of growing pressure from independent historians and researchers. And this is what most revolts those who study the secrets of the Vatican in depth, because it's not just about historical justice. It's about respecting men who shed blood in the name of faith, a faith that betrayed them in the end. Respected scholars such as Malcolm Barber, Helen Nicholson, and Alain Demerger point to the clear political interference in the conviction of the Templars, but they go further. They claim that the Vatican, by keeping documents like the Chinon parchment secret for centuries, was an active accomplice in the destruction of the truth. The Church's complicity is not only in what it did, but mainly in what it did not do. The failure to repair the error, the refusal to publicly recognize the innocence of the order, the silence in the face of the evidence that came to light, all of this forms a dark portrait of an institution that, for a long time, preferred to protect his image rather than face his own ghosts. And it is not just scholars of Templar history who denounce this. Theologians, experts in canon law, and even former members of the Church point out that there is a pattern. The Church prefers that the past remains buried. The Templar case is just another layer in a carpet of concealments that has covered the corridors of the Vatican for centuries. How many other scrolls are still locked away? How many records were destroyed? How many stories have been rewritten to protect power? And the most disturbing thing is to realize that, even in the face of all this, the Church never refuted the theories that emerged over the years. didn't even confirm it. He didn't even deny it. He just let time pass, trusting that forgetfulness would do its work. But oblivion did not come. On the contrary, with each generation, more people awaken to these hidden truths. With each new document revealed, it becomes clearer that official history was shaped by hands that feared the light. This is why the mere existence of the Chinon scroll is a silent bombshell, because not only does it contradict centuries of narrative, it also raises an uncomfortable question. If the Vatican knew of the Templars' innocence, what else does it know and not reveal? If you've come this far, it's because you feel the same restlessness. You know there's more than they say. You feel like there is something hidden, not just in the Vatican vaults, but between the lines of the history we were taught. And if you want to be part of this search, if you want to keep this flame burning, I want to invite you now to comment below. Write, "Silence is also guilt," or "If the Vatican knew, why did it hide it?" These phrases show that you are on the side of truth, that you also want historical justice, and that you no longer accept being led by half-truths. Your comment helps this video reach more people, and could be an awakening for someone who still doesn't see what is being kept in the shadows. And in the next section, we will continue revealing forgotten connections, and understand how this silence continues to this day, protecting secrets that go far beyond the Middle Ages. From the moment the Vatican hides documents like the Chinon parchment, even knowing its historical relevance, the question that arises is inevitable. What else is being hidden? The Church's silence regarding the Templars not only preserves injustice, but also feeds a network of theories that spans the centuries and connects the order to other occult and conspiratorial movements that remain active to this day. Many independent scholars, authors, and conspiracy theorists have raised a hypothesis that, as disturbing as it may seem, has gained traction. The Knights Templar didn't disappear. They just changed their name. And this claim is supported by evidence that, although not officially recognized, is repeated with disconcerting frequency in historical documents, symbols, and global political events. After the official fall of the order in 1312, many of the surviving knights simply disappeared. There is no record of where they went, where they fled, or what they did. Some say they escaped to Portugal, where the order was renamed Order of Christ, under the protection of the Portuguese crown. Others suggest that they migrated to Scotland, where they found shelter under the cloak of rebellion against papal authority. But there are those who go further and point out that it was in this silent exile that he began the transformation of the Templars into a global secret network which would influence centuries of hidden power. And this is where connections with the modern Freemasonry. Many Masonic rituals contain elements identical to those used by the Templars. The use of swords, the oaths, the clothes, the symbolism. The initiatory degrees of Freemasonry themselves carry titles such as Knight Templar, and there is an insistent reverence for the idea of a sacred order that protects an ancestral secret. Coincidence? Perhaps. But for those who study the behind the scenes of power, this connection seems more like an echo than an invention. Some researchers suggest that Freemasonry not only inherited Templar elements, but was created directly by the last members of the order as a way to continue their mission in secret. And this theory gains even more strength when we look at the connection between Freemasonry and governments, secret societies, and the Vatican itself. Yes, because even though we officially condemn practices such as Freemasonry and the Illuminati, there are documents that suggest that the Vatican has maintained contact with members of secret orders over the centuries, whether to negotiate, control, or monitor. And then, when this network of relationships expands, one of the most explosive words of our time comes into play: Illuminati, a secret society that supposedly emerged with the aim of freeing man from religious and governmental oppression, but which over time infiltrated the world's power structures. And what is the root of many of its symbols? The same ones that appear in Templar rituals. The same eyes, the same pyramids, the same sacred numbers, the same promise of a hidden light, a forbidden gnosis, that can only be achieved by those who traverse the layers of secrecy. Have you ever stopped to think about how far this web goes? Did the Templars really disappear? Or did They simply step out of the lights of the cathedrals and into the shadows of discrete societies, reconfiguring their original mission in a new form, more invisible, more influential, more powerful. And if that's true, then the Vatican's silence isn't just about the past. It's about the present, about control, about the fear that someone, some group, some voice will unearth the secrets buried beneath centuries of stone and blood and fire. And if the Templars, or those who inherited their mission, still operate between the lines of history, do they still keep what the Church tried to erase? If this question provokes you as much as it does me, leave your comment here. Write, "The Templars did not disappear," or "The truth lives on in the shadows." These words help spread this search for answers, increase channel engagement, and most importantly, they show that you are attentive, awake, and ready to go deeper. Because in the next section, we will explain what the possible ways would be to find today the remains of this hidden power. The questions keep coming up when we connect the pieces of this story. The Vatican's prolonged silence, the deliberate concealment of key documents such as the Chinon parchment, the cruel execution of Jacques de Molay, and the sudden disappearance of the greatest military and spiritual order in medieval Christendom do not seem like simple accidents of history. What emerges from this narrative is not just a doubt about guilt, but the construction of a pattern, a carefully written script behind the scenes, where political, spiritual, and economic interests collide in dark ways. The doubt that hangs in the air, and that provokes more and more scholars, is inevitable. Did the Vatican betray the Templars by choice, coldly, as part of a strategy to preserve its absolute rule? Or will the Holy See, pressured by the power play of King Philip V of France, it was just a piece manipulated on this medieval board, used as an instrument to eliminate those who knew too much, and who no longer bowed to the authority of the crowns or ecclesiastical dogma? History, as we know it, was written by the victors, and the Templars, who held perhaps Christendom's greatest secret, something that could completely redefine the relationship between man, God, and the Church, were eliminated in a coordinated and ruthless way. But the questions don't go away. On the contrary, they intensify. There are records of secret meetings between clerics and nobles in the months before the fall of the order. There are missing letters, contradictory papal bulls, unofficial testimonies that suggest that within the structure of the Vatican itself, there were disagreements. Some cardinals reportedly tried to intervene, others remained silent for fear of reprisals. And all of this feeds the possibility that, yes, the betrayal was real, but the blame may have been shared. The Church did not act alone, but it also did not resist. And that, in the end, weighs as much as a sentence. But why this effort? Why destroy an entire order? Why eliminate men who dedicated their lives to protecting pilgrims, fighting for the faith, building fortresses that still stand the test of time today? The answer may be in the archives that still remain locked beneath the foundations of the Vatican. And many believe that the heart of this answer revolves around a sacred artifact, a mystical object whose legends span the centuries, the Holy Grail. Yes, the most sought-after relic in history. A chalice, a symbol, a genetic secret. The interpretations are many, but the connection with the Templars is insistent. Of all the orders of the Middle Ages, they were the closest to the original sources of faith. They were in Jerusalem. They dug under Solomon's temple. They maintained contact with wise men, scribes, and initiates from the East, and according to several theories, it was precisely in this contact that they found something forbidden, something too sacred to be understood or accepted. This something was protected, hidden, transported, and perhaps, who knows, delivered to safe hands when the siege began to close. And if the Holy Grail, whatever it is, still exists, some say it is not lost, but saved. And not by chance. Suspicions fall on those who deny it, the Vatican and its secret archives. The connection between the Templars and the Grail may be the key to understanding not only their persecution, but the urgency with which their names, symbols, and legacies were erased. Because if the Templars found the Grail, that changes everything. And that's precisely why the next video is so important. If you've come this far, it's because you're not here by chance. You feel like there is something beyond the official story. you realize that the secrets of the Vatican, the mysteries surrounding the Templars, and the documents hidden in the shadows of the Church are still alive. And that makes you part of a minority, a silent brotherhood of seekers who are not content with what is said on the surface. So if this video moved you in any way, leave your like right now. This really helps the channel and shows that this content needs to reach more people. And if you are not yet registered, click the subscribe button and activate the bell, because what's coming goes far beyond what you've heard so far. And for those of you who stayed until the end, I have a special request. Comment below the phrase, "I am the guardian of the truth." This way I will know who the true investigators of this journey are. Those who do not shy away from difficult questions, who are not afraid to face the behind the scenes of faith and history. And now, it doesn't stop here, because the next video is already appearing on the screen. Click on it and continue with me in this investigation. There, we will reveal even more hidden details about the connection between the Templars and the Holy Grail, and what could be hidden inside the most mysterious library in the world, the Vatican. See you there.